Um, Welcome back. The next presentation is called Keeping the Mind Young with Leah Luong. She's the current Director of Communications at the KFA. She's been with us for a year. Before that, she was a friend of the foundation for a few years, attending dialogues. And after the presentation, there is a panel with Gianni, Cory, and Seamus. And Leah will say a little bit more about them. Thank you.
Thanks, Francisco. Oh, hello. Welcome back, everyone, to the May gathering. We're almost to the end of our event, and the topic of this session is keeping the mind young. One of our projects, called The Immeasurable, is geared mainly towards a younger audience and those who may be unfamiliar with Krishnamurti's teachings. The Immeasurable project is dedicated to exploring the essential questions of our existence, and its aim is to present Krishnamurti material in a modern format. It functions as an entry point to the infinite depth of the teachings. We produce short videos based on excerpts from K's public talks, which have been pretty well received on social media. These videos help illustrate Krishnamurti's approach to different topics such as love, meditation, and death, offering his unique angle for the public to reflect upon. The Immeasurable content is adapted to fit different platforms and is present on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, web articles, and all major podcasting platforms. As of last year, 3.6 billion people use social media worldwide, and an estimated 100 million people listen to podcasts every month. Efforts from the Immeasurable project often serve as a stepping stone to the rest of Krishnamurti's body of work, or even an introduction to programs at the center. Last year, a former residential scholar told me he applied for the program after listening to one of our podcast episodes. So you can see how important this project is in our goal of making these teachings available to as many people as possible. While there may be many internet users who are unfamiliar with Krishnamurti, there are certainly many who are interested in broader topics such as philosophy or religion. Krishnamurti often spoke about topics like these, and part of what the Immeasurable does is expose people to Krishnamurti's insights on these themes. One of our most recent Immeasurable YouTube videos, titled "Is God an Invention of Thought?" explores what Krishnamurti calls the religious mind.
What is religion? Man has sought something that's not of this world. From the most ancient of people till now, man has sought something that time, thought has nothing to do with that. He has sought it. And in his search, he's been tracked by the priests of the world, who become the interpreters of that. We know, you don't, we'll tell you all about it. And the established religions are just nonsense. As far as, please don't accept this for the speaker. They're just entertainment, excitement, the thing to do for a while. If you're young, you avoid all that nonsense. As you grow older, you get frightened. You become this or that. And all the things that are in the churches, temples, and mosques are put together by thought. God is invention of thought. So if we can scrap all that from our brain, from our belief, from our hope, then we are free to inquire. what is religion. Etymologically, the word has not exact beginning. It's not to bind as it was originally thought. So what we are inquiring into what is the religious mind, not the believing mind. That is very simple, very easy to explain. But the religious mind, because the religious mind alone can create a new culture, not the believing mind, not the mind that has faith. So we're going to inquire into it, if you're not tired. To inquire into it very deeply, one must ask, what is meditation? Not how to meditate, not what are the systems of meditation, whether Eastern, Far Eastern, Near East, or the present gurus and with their gurus from India or gurus from America. They have got systems, methods, which have all become so money-making concern. There's no depth to it. So if you can abolish all that, put aside all that, that means you are free from all authority to inquire. What is meditation? To go into it, one must be, as we said, be free from fear, pleasure. The ending of sorrow is the beginning of meditation.
Rarely does a human being live with clarity, awareness, sensitivity, and total inward harmony. We're typically in conflict with one another or in ourselves. There's always a new challenge to face, and we meet life with the memory of all our yesterdays, which is a conditioned mind. Our perception of the new is shaped by psychological memory, so we don't fully understand it. It strengthens what we already know. In other words, we don't have a complete understanding of what is because it's overshadowed by the past. We know that factual memory is essential for survival. Remembering how to drive home or that a burning stove is hot is necessary for everyday living. Krishnamurti said, "Thought is a response of memory, the past. When thought acts, it is this past which is acting as memory, as experience, as knowledge, as opportunity." So it's clear that thought is needed for practical matters. Yet when it comes to the psychological realm, thought doesn't seem to be able to end our inner problems like sorrow, conflict, or envy. In fact, when attempting to solve these issues, we might actually be moving farther away from the ending of them. Krishnamurti implied that thought is limited and can't be used to truly end these psychological problems. And although it can be difficult to distinguish between these two aspects of memory or thought, he questions the necessity of psychological memory and thought. We cultivate psychological memory as a way to sustain the psychological self and give continuity to the me and the mine. Psychological memory is incapable of meeting life anew. It only knows its accumulated biases and prejudices. Krishnamurti called this facet of memory an incomplete experience and suggested exploring why it is we give such importance to certain memories and not others, because it's often from this conditioned state that humanity operates. In our attempts to understand or improve ourselves, there's already the past coming in, wanting to achieve a certain result, subtly telling us what to think, than rather looking at how we think. When psychological discontentment appears, we soon satisfy it and find ways to become contented. But this kind of satisfaction is temporary, and it's a superficial movement. What Krishnamurti calls the scar of memory is self-centered activity that rises from an occupation with the self. Moving away from psychological discontentment may actually be what's keeping us from meeting life without the burden of what we think we know. I wonder if we're aware of this process taking place and that it's a hindrance to understanding life and with relating with one another. While most of us may not consider discontentment a positive thing, Krishnamurti called it the flame of inquiry, something that drives, creates, and urges us on, plunging us into the unknown. This is what keeps the mind young. But what does he mean by a young mind, and is it possible to keep the mind young when one continues to smother this flame with satisfaction and the search for psychological security? This flame of discontent seems to point to the quality of mind that is fresh. It's constantly inquiring, and it doesn't easily accept words or explanations. Krishnamurti suggested that deep attention, which involves all your senses and care, is the flame. And although this may sound nice intellectually, living it seems to be another thing entirely because we're so attached to what we know. We're really good at smothering this flame, at satisfying our discontent. So good that we're often unaware of this process taking place, which is why Kay emphasized the importance of giving attention to the way we think and behave. Inquiring without the known could mean staying with what we would normally try to control or suppress. It may also mean inquiring with no motive to become enlightened, achieve something, or arrive somewhere else, all of which are coming from a center, or the me. If one realized that thought continues to create a series of escapes that ultimately maintain conflict and division, could there be listening without motive or the desire to immediately step in and change something? Krishnamurti says, when you listen attentively, in that attention there is no you attending. You are listening, not that you are listening. There is only the act of listening. To have this flame of discontent and let it burn is quite the revolutionary thing. Is it possible to live differently and, as Krishnamurti would say, keep the mind young? The religious mind Krishnamurti was pointing to earlier might be describing a mind that is free to find out what the truth is, a mind that isn't burdened by experience and doesn't reach back in memory to see what it already knows, because we're limited by what we think we know. Krishnamurti asked, can there be action without memory? That means, can there be action which is constantly revolutionary? The only thing that is constantly revolutionary is action without the screen of memory. An idea cannot bring about constant revolution because it always modifies action according to the background of its conditioning. Our question is then, can there be action without the thought process which creates the idea, which in turn controls action? I say there can be, and that it can take place immediately when you see that idea is not a release, but a hindrance to action. If I see that, my action will not be based on any idea, and therefore I am in a state of complete revolution, and therefore there is the possibility of a society which is never static, which never needs to be overthrown and rebuilt. I say you can live with your wife, with your husband, with your neighbor, in that state of action which is not conformed to an idea, and that it is possible only when you understand the significance of an idea, how idea is brought about and molds action. The idea that molds action is detrimental to action, and one who looks to an idea as a means of bringing about a revolution, either in the mass or the individual, is looking in vain. Revolution is constant. It is never static. Ideas create not a revolution, but merely a modified continuity. And one of the most vibrant aspects that we have at the Krishnamurti Center is our residential scholar program, where one can inquire into the teachings, challenge their assumptions, and discuss these types of topics. Next, I'd like to welcome Gianni Garubo to the stage so he can expound more on this program and tell us more about this unique opportunity. Gianni was first introduced to Krishnamurti's work as a student at Oak Grove School, and currently he works at the Krishnamurti Foundation with the development team and at Oak Grove School as a teacher's aide.
Thank you. So today I'll be talking a bit about the residential scholar program that the foundation or the Krishnamurti Center has, and this is a program or a dimension of the work of the foundation that I find very interesting. As somebody who's been around the foundation for the last couple years, as well as a student of the Oak Grove School, where I would, come to these May gatherings and see the residential students there. I've had a lot of interaction with them. Sorry, I'm saying students, scholars. I've had a lot of interactions with them over the years, and I find that when I heard Leah talking about the flame of discontent and the seriousness of looking into these things, that having these residential scholars who come from all around the country and all around the world, and they typically come for about a year, and they stay and they live on the grounds, that it brings a serious energy to the dialogues and to the explorations, both the dialogues that we plan on having and also the ones that you find yourselves in just passing by each other on any given day. So, very much looking forward to Seamus Morrison will be coming up on our panel here, and we'll be sharing some reflections that he has written. He is a current residential scholar and also a friend of mine from our Oak Grove School days. And we'll also have Cory Fisher, who was among the first residential scholars all the way back in 2013. So we do have a video here that we'll play, and it gives a nice overview of both what the land looks like over at the center, as well as some of the activities in the day-to-day life of the residential scholars. They do volunteer and help work at the foundation, as well as to participate in all of the programs that are held at the center. And the work, their work responsibilities are all centered around taking care of the land or preparing the breakfast that we all share for those who stay at the retreat. And just also, I used to work at the retreat, and I'd come in the morning and this was all before COVID, but every morning there would always be some kind of conversation going on around the table, and it almost felt kind of like a bit of a warm fire that every day when I'd come into to get to see what the topic was and to meet the people who were there. So before we watch the video, I would just like to anchor this all in a quote by Krishnamurti, and this is a quote regarding the centers. "It must be a center for those who are deeply interested in the teachings, a place where they can stay and study. In the very old days, an ashrama, which means retreat, was a place where people came to gather their energies, to dwell upon and explore the deeper religious aspects of life. Modern places of this kind generally have some sort of leader, guru, abbot, or patriarch who guides, interprets, and dominates. The centers must have no such leader or guru, for the teachings themselves are the expression of that truth which serious people must find for themselves." And so now let us watch the video.
I found the work of Krishnamurti, when I was 20, I read Freedom from the Known. Yeah, by reading Kay's work, that can really bring us an awareness. Younger people definitely need this type of teachings. We delude ourselves in activity of entertainment and distraction that we try to kind of hide ourselves from the true well-being that we can have naturally.
When I read this book, Freedom from the Known, from Krishnamurti, I was really impressed, not because I was understanding what he was speaking about, but the depth that he was giving to every subject. If you observe attentively, you can really see that every sentence, it's the core of the teaching. Like, it's almost like you don't have to go at the next page. You know, you can really open a book and you don't need the 155 pages after. You just need the first. And if the first pages really resonate in yourself, you don't have to go further. So I did like this aspect of Krishnamurti because most of people say Krishnamurti attracts like intellectual people, but also it attracts people they really want to be free from any spiritual fantasy or any abstraction. You know, they really want to go with the whole capacity of the reason to understand what is, which is our life.
I found Krishnamurti's work through a spontaneous string of events, but I got exposed to this text that really changed and transformed my life. I was living life less on autopilot, and it's like I could actually see what was going on in my mind instead of allowing my consciousness to dictate what I thought, where I went, who I had relationships with, what I thought about my relationships. And for once, I could just see all of it going on and be okay with that. It's allowed me to be more comfortable being uncomfortable. Instead of running away from my pain, now I feel like I can sit down with myself and hear myself and be okay with just being me. But you see the suffering that's in the world that isn't decreasing. If anything, technology and advancements are propelling the ways in which humans cause each other to suffer or help each other to suffer. And I think if we have generations of young people that know how to slow things down just within themselves, that's going to be transformative in itself.
Minutes while we set up our panel, and we'll invite Seamus Morrison down and Cory Fisher to also come and join us on the panel. Welcome back. We are now assembled in panel form. Now Seamus Morrison will, again, I said earlier, was our current residential scholar, and will share some reflections that he's written, and perhaps you'd like to introduce what you'll be sharing with us today.
Right. So I wrote a piece for the Foundation Focus, which, what is the official definition of the Foundation Focus, do you know?
No?
It's just a magazine.
Yeah,
that
newsletter.
the Krishnamurti Foundation publishes. So I wrote an article for that, which I will be reading, and also some reflections that I've had. Okay. So I woke up this morning relaxed, not in the state that I was in yesterday. Nothing that happened the day before mattered, even though the mind was still processing it. I was still in the present. Thinking about the day before and what had upset me has no relevance here at the Krishnamurti Foundation of America. It is a place less of learning, but of achieving a state. The word achieving seems misleading, as the state is always in the body. The body is always living, therefore it always has a purpose. This became clear to me here, the work and study inching ever closer to one another, the work filling containers of butter, setting out the box of bread, pushing the cereal cart across the floor while trying to be quiet, constantly forgetting to do the job right, being wrong. This work became the study, and the flow does not seem to be connected at all with the past. It seems wrong to connect it with the past. We are always leaving something, the past, memories, and hurt, behind in the pursuit of the work. Not in the negative sense of leaving behind, but when a river or a yoga flow is flowing, they are never the past. So there is a balance between having the past, between being hurt or scarred or damaged, and not having the past, of being entirely the job. So when you are called to do that job, there is no trace of the events from the day before, because they never happened. I don't mean to be nihilistic. I call this forgetting the endless cleaning of the self, innocence. The purest kind of innocence that comes from understanding the impact of the past, feeling it, and canceling it with devotion. I've been learning to do this for 6 months, to become this. Being here helps me to do that. The fears and desires, the rattlesnake I encounter, and the spike of adrenaline it gives me serve to color the purpose, to make it a lived thing. On Tuesdays, the residential students prepare lunch for the staff, a group anywhere from 5 to 15 people. On Tuesday afternoons, the staff meets again for the What's Up meeting, a dialogue beginning with a moment of silence and a check-in. Something I've appreciated, that I've remembered in every city or fast-paced place I've been to, are the moments of silence at both the KFA and at Oak Grove. It's as if in every one, something new comes alive. I went to junior high and high school at the Oak Grove School, and every time we went on a field trip to the KFA, in particular the library, it felt like coming home. It was for this reason that I applied to be a residential student. Since arriving here over 2 months ago, I have focused on recalibrating myself and the need for control in my life. In the book Beyond Violence, Krishnamurti says that one must give up all control. The control of desiring a certain outcome, the control of wanting a person to be different than they are, and the control of trying to maintain an identity that will change over time. What better place to let go of control than the home of Krishnamurti? Anatman, or no self, is defined as the doctrine that there is no permanent or unchanging self. This Buddhist concept baffled me for years, as I could not figure out why anyone would want to disidentify with the idea of a permanent self. The retreat I attended at the KFA in the fall of 2021 was a turning point for me. I came to realize at the core of the human journey is falling in love with no self. Sitting in our circle of white plastic picnic chairs, I discovered that we were not trying to end human suffering, rather, we were there to make it easier. And the concept of no self does that. No self takes the pressure off of you to conform to what society wants you to be. It lets you become who you want to become, because there is no permanent self. You are not stuck inside a box. You can be everything, if you want. As Krishnamurti said, you are the world. We all suffer, are anxious, search for happiness and jobs and money. And so we have to realize that our consciousness is the consciousness of humanity. This is not a nihilistic concept, but a way to assert the wholeness of humanity. We all have no self. We all have one self, which is all of us. My sudden breakthrough in my journey to relinquish control was brought about by the fear of being in a new place, sleeping in a room smaller than my single dorm in college, and relying on a space heater in the dead of Ojai's coldest winter since 2018. I found that works best for me is to love where I am, not thinking about the future, but loving where I am all the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Seamus, for sharing that.
Thank you. You're welcome.
I'm wondering now if I should pass the microphone to Cory as one, I think I'm remembering correctly, right? The first round of near the first round of residential scholars back in 2013. If you have any reflections that you'd like to share or anything.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Seamus and Leah.
Thank you.
And hi, everyone. Yes, I came as part of the second batch of what was then called interns at the foundation. And I have since been there. I never really left. So it's a little difficult to separate my experience, my continuous experience as a part of the foundation, from my initial year there. But what I can say is that I still feel that the program is probably one of the most important things that the foundation offers, because it's a very, how do you say? Well, it's a rare opportunity, but it's a very intense and special opportunity to look into all these things that you encounter in Krishnamurti's work and play with them and engage with other people that are interested and really take the time to see what it actually even means. And so something about having that opportunity is, I think, really invaluable. And, you know, I kind of wish everyone could do it. But, yeah, one thing, yeah, my intention for the year was to try and do as little as possible and to not fill the free time that we had available with other activities, which is not my tendency. So the place itself became very special because there were a lot of opportunities to do nothing, and in that space you can discover a lot, as Seamus was sort of reflecting, about yourself and about how you relate to other people and how you relate to how you act in the world and what it means. And so, yeah. And then I also thought I would share, I really appreciated Siddharth's talk this morning, and something struck me about, I've been trying to look at or understand what it even means to discuss a young mind and what that actually looks like. And in his talk this morning, he mentioned something about our tendency to focus on particulars. So we live our lives focused on particular goals or desires or judgments, things that we don't like about ourselves that we want to improve. There's something about this, like narrowing in and focusing on specific elements of our lives and trying to work them out. This is a very strong way of living in us. And so I wondered if a young mind is a mind that somehow exercises the ability that we may have to be in touch with the whole of life and to relax the tendency to focus on this or that about your personality or your fears and loneliness, but somehow to take the whole thing in and see what that means. Yeah, so I'll leave it there, but I found that really interesting.
I actually have a question for you, Cory, and maybe Seamus too. So at the residential scholar program, you both talked about having this like space to do nothing. Have you been able to do that outside of the program now that you've been able to experience something like that at the center? And, you know, moving forward, like what is like life like? What's that like? Because I imagine there's maybe moments of that, and then, you know, there's lots of things to do, and then realizing that. And so I'm just wondering what it's like to be able to go through the program and then, then kind of not really re-enter society, but be back into like environments where that space and quietness isn't so obvious or intentional.
Yeah, that's probably one of the reasons that the program itself is so strong and valuable, is that it carves out that intention for you in whatever ways that it can. So, but I do think that there's a skill in learning to advocate for that time on your own. And it is something that I think comes out of a continuous rediscovery of your interest in doing that, because it can get lost in all the other things and opportunities that life has to offer, to not sort of take time to wait and see what else is available. So yeah, I think if anything, maybe being there for that year strengthened the understanding of the value of taking that time and being available for all the things that aren't so obvious. But I do think that, you know, day-to-day life, when you're not living at the Krishnamurti Foundation, it takes more of an advocacy on your own part to make time to explore these things. Yeah. Seamus, I don't know, you may also have, yeah.
I have a similar feeling. I think that, sorry, I think that you have to, having the intention is really important, and being here has strengthened that, I think, for a lot of, you know, for me and for, I'm sure, others, and you as well, right? It sounds like. And so, yeah, I think that's what's so valuable about the program, because I think in you know, elsewhere it's not really emphasized as much to maybe study, because sometimes it feels like studying silence itself, you know, because it's a very like focused thing, and you're studying human nature, basically, and I, you know, being somewhere else, studying something else, like being in college, it's not the same, because, well, I think, you know, you're also kind of studying the same thing, and yeah, but I think when you go somewhere else, when you travel or go home, you have to, I mean, you know, the intention is the most important part, I would say, but that's not always easy to find. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Well, I mean, if you guys have any questions, if we have any questions, I guess, for each other, we could say those now. Otherwise, we could move on to questions from the audience and also the online audience at some point. Yeah,
so I also have, I have this prepared for the online audience, but I would also just like to hear a little bit, you know, because I mean, the title is Keeping the Mind Young. So I'm interested to hear, what does that mean for you? You know, like, what is that, what does that look like?
Yeah, as I was thinking about it, or dwelling on it, I was just kind of reminded of, you know, here at the Oak Grove School, I'm the second grade aide, so I help out in the second grade class, and that's about 7 to 8 year olds. And there's so many little moments during the day that I feel that that I stumble across, where I see or sort of revealed to me all of the little ways in which I'm already jumping onto how to go about something or how to do something, and it's usually to try to do it in the fastest, most efficient kind of way, and it's, you know, kind of like a, you know, driving or something. It's just a habit, you know, it's habitual, and also just in terms of even the things that aren't habitual, but just, well, this is the most efficient kind of way, and so this is how we should do it. And then meeting the energy and the excitement of the students who may want to go about things in a different way. And for me, that sort of that clashes, right, in terms of what I was thinking of, or what I think, oh, but this will take so much longer if we do it this way, and we have so many things to do, right? But when you are confronted with that, and if you have the space, and fortunately here we do have that space to sort of slow down and look at that and say, well, is that not part of having a young mind? you know. And you say, oh, well, I'm young, right? You know, but in terms of the quality of your mind and the ability to observe and also see the ways that our motivations sneak in about, well, things must be done the fastest way, or they must be done the most efficient way. And that is really what's important, because, you know, if we don't do this fast enough, then we won't be able to do the next thing and then the next thing, and everything is impacting the other, right? And then when you meet these students who are at this young age, you see all of that kind of implode on itself, and you see how would I, by not exploring in this way, you can see how if you do try to go forward and say, well, this is the most efficient way, not that you would say that, but that you would insist on it, you can see that though they may follow along, that same excitement or spark of whatever their idea was, that creative expression, isn't quite there. And so that, I think, for me in my own life of examining the creative expression, but also how to keep the mind young, is to not fall into these this static sort of always coming from the same place, trying to go to the same place, and a lot of this is even without thinking, right? It's not that you're thinking and planning it all out, but that I just feel that in my day-to-day experience working with 7 and 8-year-olds, that they'll be very good at pointing out to you all of the ways that you are doing this. Yeah.
The first thing I thought of too was also comes from children, but I don't know if anyone has been around a young child that has asked them why over and over and over again. The sky is blue. Why? That tree's over there. Why? I'm answering your questions. Why? And they're not even asking why to get an answer. They're just they're just asking. And I think that that's the quality of a young mind, is just inquiring with this like engaged and active interest that doesn't seek an answer, that isn't trying to achieve something. It's just really interested in inquiring. And I think that, I think that's part of what keeps the mind young.
Gianni said something, and it got me thinking about what I was going to say about. I think I've been, creating the space. There's space to learn about these things, and like what I was interested in for my whole time here, as you could probably tell from my paper, was the theme of innocence, I feel like it's, I've been trying to wonder, how is it that we can achieve that state where it's, maybe not something that you leave because maybe you weren't innocent at one point and you're not now, because that didn't sit right with me. So I realized that maybe it's something that you grow into. And I think that is a fabulous way of keeping the mind young. If, it's hard to see at times. But I feel like, maybe just always, creating the space for yourself. And I think maybe not taking the self too seriously, but it's a very serious place. I think we take ourselves pretty seriously, And but so it's interesting. It's nice to have that space to just step back and you know, be able to observe yourself. Because I feel like if the if there's the division there and we're not really observing ourselves, then, well, right, as we've heard from Krishnamurti, there's going to be conflict, but there's also going to be a lack of space, maybe a lack of, I don't know, playfulness, or maybe taking yourself too seriously. So it's just really, really great to have that space. And as I said before, I think it doesn't come easily to find that space, which is why I think it's not, if we look at it as something dependent upon where you are, like physically, then it may never come. So I think it's inside ourselves. Just being young, being able to observe the self.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions from the audience?
I don't have a question. I want to extend an endorsement. I feel that there's a dimension of the work of the foundation that we shy away from talking about, and that is the living dimension of the teachings. We're very clever and adroit at talking about the dissemination and the preservation of the teachings, but the living of the teachings we rarely ever discuss. And we certainly, perhaps out of modesty, or perhaps out of shy ignorance, we don't use the phrase. But I'll ask you, as residential students, do you think this is a good expression to describe your responsibility?
Thank you for that question, Mark. I certainly want to give way to Seamus and Cory if they have answers, but I'll go first in what comes up for me when hearing that, which is I have found it to be an immense quality of in terms of living the teachings or having that energy, and there's so many brilliant things that we can watch and listen to others and discuss and prepare written reflections and whatnot. But living, having serious people living at the center, and as somebody who commutes in, I'm still there nearly every day, and to find these little moments of passing each other or these spontaneous meetings and discussions, I feel is the living quality, and the quality of to go into it without having to be perhaps socially concerned about hurting someone's feelings or exposing our own vulnerabilities and our own to just be able to be in relationship and have it be so that we can expose our ignorance and our vulnerabilities to one another, I feel is the real living quality.
Right, I feel like I agree with that. I feel like, you know, it's I have definitely wondered about this myself. How I don't. It seems to be kind of buried under the teachings is the actual living of them, or not buried under them, but buried under the studying of them. For me, when I read a Krishnamurti book or watch a video, it doesn't immediately translate into the living of those teachings, and it has to maybe sit for a while. I think that I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that living in the center has helped me to live them. So it is true for me, and I believe that the residential student program is very unique in that respect because of their accommodations, letting you stay on campus. It feels very, very holistic.
Yeah, I do think that it's a consistent and recurring question of integrity, and that somehow if things are actually moving and an attempt is being made at trying to even understand what living the teachings would be, then studying the teachings and living the teachings are the same thing. Because somehow, if the teachings are anything but words on paper, they're the active exploration, however that may occur, of one's life and all the things that happen in it. So somehow, I don't know that you can say that one is living the teachings or not, but it's like a constant question of whether or not there is a consistent attempt at exploring one's life without condemnation, without judgment, and just understanding what understanding oneself even looks like. So I think it's a good question, and I think it's something that the program, that's probably where the real value of the program comes, is to move from having an interest in Krishnamurti's work and considering yourself someone that's studying them, to attempt to see what it means to live a life where exploration is happening, which I again, it's hard to even define what that looks like, but to play with it actively is very different than reading it. And I think that's the joy of being able to do that is, again, for everyone, but it's, the focus of the program is to avail yourself of the time to really let your life become available to you in a different way, something. Yeah. So yeah, we'll take a question here. There's a few here, and then I also we have quite a few online. So.
Okay. So what's the connection between a youthful mind and presence and being? That's all I ask. Could you repeat that? The microphone.
So I can repeat the question. The question is, what's the connection between a youthful mind and presence and being?
I've noticed whenever I am feeling not right, whenever I don't feel good about myself or about something in life that's missing, and Leah mentioned this as well, I try. I don't always succeed, but I try to sit with it. And I think in sitting with it, there's maybe a youthful quality in that. I think maybe sometimes it can seem like if we run away from something, and I'm speaking from my experience, if I run away from something, then I'm becoming old. My mind is not young. And because when you have that youthful quality, when you sit with something, I feel like the mind is just playing with it. It's just entertaining it. Oh, this is, my day is, not that good today. I'm just going to play with that. It's not a definition. It doesn't define me or anything else that I do. So there's that play in it. There's youth, some youth. So that's, I believe, the connection for me between youthfulness and being.
Thank you. I have a brief quote, a brief comment, and then a question. So the quote, all of this reminds me of the wonderful quote by the Zen master Suzuki: in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. And I think you could replace youthful mind with beginner's mind. It's the same idea. But it also strikes me that there's a negativity around the idea of youthful mind. So I think of like the word naive. Right? If you see somebody referred to as naive, that's a negative. Usually that's used in a negative way. But so I just looked up. The word naive actually comes from the French adjective meaning natural, just born, which comes from the Latin nativus, which means native or natural. So it's actually kind of saying, dying to every day and beginning the next day anew. It's not. Why is it taken on this negative connotation that it's taken on? So anyway, that's the observation and the quote. The question I wanted to ask is: so we have 4 people who are young talking about young, youthful mind. And obviously, our culture is very much, to go back to Suzuki's quote, our culture is one that values and promotes the expert mind, right? Children are asked when they're this big, what are you going to be when you grow up? How are you going to define yourself? What are you going to be an expert in? Because that's really what that question is. So I'm wondering what advice, old people are always giving young people advice. I was once a young person, so I remember it's usually advice that you don't want, but it seems to flow anyway. So I want it to flow the other way. What advice would you give to someone who who has lived their life, I've, since studying Krishnamurti and other things, I've certainly tried to rebalance my life, but I certainly spent much of my life in that drive to be an expert. What do you have to be an expert in? Not what are you open to? And keeping in mind that the word naive has always been a negative thing, instead of what Seamus, you described waking up that day and choosing not to let the previous day affect you. That's naive. That's newborn. You were newborn that day, And so anyway, so I want some advice from the of you.
Oh man. Yeah, usually I would say it's the other way around, right? I mean, even being up here at the podium or the stage, there's like these thoughts flooding to my mind of like, oh, I want these people to perceive me as someone who knows what they're talking about. And that in itself is like memory, banging at my brain. And so that was refreshing, Mark. Thank you. Yeah, it's never, I guess for me, been asked, turned around, I guess. But now that it has, I would just say, and this applies for myself too, is that just, maybe it's like what I would call the curse of knowledge, like we're limited by what we think we know, and we're really limited by the stuff that we think we know, but we don't even know that we know that, if that makes any sense. Or we don't know that we're so attached to what we think that we know. And I think like the older you get, sometimes you learn, or that kind of becomes conditioned into you that like what you know is you. And so I think just like seeing that may allow something new to occur, something young. Mm-hmm.
So there's a question we have from online.
Do we have time? I had an answer.
Oh, sure. Go ahead. Yeah, of course.
It's just a very quick answer.
Great.
Okay. So you kind of, as one gets older, you kind of grow into a pattern of, the conditioning. You can feel it, telling you, valuing, being something, being the expert. So you kind of grow into that pattern. But I think having a youthful mind is just saying, maybe just pushing that aside and just being yourself. I don't know. I have definitely felt very youthful when I don't want to become anything, when I don't want to be something, when I just want to be myself. And even the word to be implies that there is some effort. There's some effort to be yourself. But I think to be maybe in the etymology of the word, I'm not sure, it just means no effort. I'm not sure, but I feel like to be feels the best when there's no effort, when it's just like a rock. A rock is not being, it's just there, you know. I'm not saying people are rocks. Anyway.
Thank you, Seamus. So this question comes from an online participant, and I may read it twice, just so that we all, because there's... so, do you find that there is a danger of a dogma arising from the teachings, that one, to a greater or lesser extent, becomes adept with a certain set of doctrines that one lives life by?
That's a really great question. I've sat, I think, in a lot of dialogues where sometimes it feels like we're just kind of showing off our Krishnamurti expertise. And while that's, I guess, nice, I think that one of the most beautiful things about Krishnamurti was that when someone would ask him a question, even if like he had just answered it yesterday, it really seems like he was like answering it for the first time. And we've kind of been hinting at this with like this young mind, but like, I mean, maybe it's like just kind of a little bit of what Seamus was saying of like this emptiness, and being willing to kind of be like empty of like who we've all become, or, you know, what we know about Krishnamurti. And even though that, you know, all of these quotes that we've been reading and our discussions for this weekend have been really nice, it is up to all of us, right? I mean, he said, you know, don't just believe me, like, don't believe any of us. It's really for all of us to play around with and experiment for ourselves and to really find out.
If I could hearken back to a talk earlier when we were examining poetry, the line was, "Doubt is a precious ointment." And for me, I think that has been one of the things that I've carried the most. So I see the way that, you know, in a lot of dialogues, certain terminology comes up and it can feel at times, sometimes circular. But I think that at the core of it is that doubt and the acknowledgement that it is only through your own searching that you'll ever come upon anything. I'm reminded of an Emerson quote that I'm not going to remember it, and it's exactly, but it was something that each of our eyes were to look upon a ray of light at a certain particular angle and a particular eye, and that was the only way that you'd be able to see that truth or that light. And also just to remember, this was from what I read earlier about the centers, but just that the centers must have no such leader or guru, for the teachings themselves are the expression of that truth which serious people must find for themselves.
Yeah, just to add a little bit there, there does seem to be a moment where these things can start to feel like doctrines are arising in you, or certain ways of behaving are settling in because you feel like you've discovered something that should stick or that is important or valuable. And so then I think somehow a question or an antidote to that is to ask, what is it that you expect to gain? So what would, if you decided to follow Krishnamurti's teachings to a T and follow them as though they were the right way to live, what would you be expecting to gain from doing that? And somehow that seems to open up where the doctrines have settled in. Yeah, so we have another question from the audience here we can take.
Thank you. Some of the things that I heard from Krishnamurti personally, it reminds me when I read this piece about the flame of discontent. He stepped away from being world teacher. And I remember he's talking about, don't preserve any of my teachings. They can easily turn into dogma. They can limit the young mind. Self-inquiry goes through stages of discomfort. And breaking through that to the state of no fear is the unraveling of who you really are. And I remember a Latin, when I studied Latin, it was a statement that shifted my thinking, caused me to drop out of college, and innovate technologies that created a global outreach of communities connected. And the Latin version was bastade no converandum, which loosely translated, don't let the bastards grind or limit your thinking and define your purpose. So as I look at the young minds, you have incredibly fresh, untutored, unconditioned, to avoid the dogmas, the mantras, and all the other stuff that constrain the growth of a reality that you could be driving. The technology that I helped created in '94, today, I was not the only one, but there are three other, is the global internet. And which is the first live streaming. As a result, I was ostracized by the entertainment community in Hollywood, which I was a part of. But today, that's worldwide. And the young minds like yours have an opportunity to share this on a global perspective using things like YouTube and teaching models and allowing people to trust, believe, and have the strength of their conviction to make a difference.
Thank you.
It's actually interesting. I was born in South Africa, and our education and the way we were taught was quite different to what is done in America. It really, I never seen a question and answer. They give you three answers and you pick the one that you should, that's correct. We always had to think things through. When they asked somebody in class, they asked, critique something, and the highest score was 50. And because no one talked about the negative, they only talked about the positive, or something like that. So they said you can't get more than 50% because you didn't answer what the question really is that you need to critique is to do the positive and the negative. It's very different. Then it's also the time period. So when I came to America, and all of a sudden we never had any television in South Africa because of apartheid. So we, fortunately here, what we were actually, in our company, we did a lot of work for major corporations, and we were a branding company. So it's how we suddenly, we had to deal with television, and radio is different, and we were able to do things with corporations. So we helped, HBO was born when we helped at that. The internet, like you say, was new. We became the people who helped Adobe get created. Acrobat came. It was a completely new technology, and we were able to, we named it Acrobat because it's a very different kind of thing. No, people don't name it that way. So I can see exactly what's, that in a sense, what Krishnamurti is doing. In a sense, he's getting you into space where you actually see something and you look at it quite differently. I remember being, I did a commerce degree in South Africa, and that was right at the beginning of college, and college was fun. We were all having, playing at college. I went to the lectures, but I didn't read any of the case studies, and I couldn't believe that I actually got passed, because the person said it's obvious they measured what I was doing in the tests, and they said that it's obvious you didn't read any of the case studies, but your thinking, what you put into your exam task, was accurate for the law case. So I'm going to pass you. You get 50%, so you pass. So it's wonderful that this could actually happen here, and what Krishnamurti is doing is he's actually getting your mind into that kind of state that we were put in the kind of thing, and we were one of the major companies in the country, and that next thing is there's TED. I happened to go to the second TED, and for over 30 years I went to TED.
Sorry, Aubrey, we've got about 5 minutes.
So this is the last thing.
Yeah.
So the last thing is that in TED, the whole world technologically was changing, and you could learn so much at TED. It was unbelievable. Thanks.
Thank you.
I hope I'm tall enough for this. Thank you for accommodating me. Well, thank you for sharing your experience and your story. I appreciate that. I actually knew Vincent, that I saw in that movie. We were in a UCLA program together. Now, I have lived life in the fast lane, and later in life I discovered to go to the slow lane. And most of the people I know and I work with, same story. You are young and you have started your life in the direction of experiencing the slow lane, from what I gather. I'm very curious to understand from you, having been in the slow lane, how easy or difficult is it for you to emerge into the world? The world is fast-paced. There is no doubt about that. I want to hear about your perspective of how you are finding your emergence into the fast-paced world. Thank you.
I guess it's a little unfortunate that we have to share this microphone, because I would like to speak more with you. Just in terms of what you mean by fast lane, I certainly understand fast pace, but for me, fast lane fast lane is really just bounding from one distraction to another, and I can definitely say that in periods of my life I've felt that, and certainly when I've felt pain or suffering, or you have that, I just want to keep not to look at anything, and so I will find a myriad of different things to concern myself with, and for thought to grapple onto, and to wrap itself around, and to look at that. So in terms of fast lane, that's what I hear, or what comes up for me. I don't know if that's exactly what you mean, because I think that like many things, if we have our responsibilities that we have to take care of, and even if it's dynamic and things change, I feel that there's still a lot of time that we fill our days with those distractions, or those sort of comforts that we seek when we don't want to look at what is going on, or we're trying to avoid the difficulties of what, whether that be work responsibilities or personal responsibilities. So, yeah, I guess perhaps if someone else feels another way, or, just in terms of whether fast-paced really means bounding from distraction to distraction, or is fast-paced merely a description of doing a lot of things one after the other.
I sort of like that at least as one way of defining that, but I think that there also is an element of having to confront your own tendency to compare yourself and the way you're living your life with what's expected, or what you're used to seeing. So it can also present its own confusions when it's hard to know exactly what we're all meaning by fast lane, but there's a way that we as a society live life that can be very consuming and fast-paced and ambitious, and so all these things are what we're commonly used to. So if you, I guess at a minimum, start to question that, or question what other possibilities are, I do get a sense that you initially confront your own tendency to compare what you choose or what you are doing with what you have grown to expect, or what you see, which can be very interesting. So it brings up a lot, but I think then you have some insight into how that feels, and then maybe some possibility to actually maintain somewhere in the slow lane. But yeah, so I think that about wraps it up for time. So thank you everyone here, thank you everyone online, and thank all of you.
Thank you.